Right, now the Constitution of Kenya is now 11, having survived 3 attempts to change it and countless efforts to emasculate it. Its full implementation has also been fraught with many ifs, buts, and maybes. Tonight, with all due respect, we have the actual best panel to interrogate the state of the law and politics around Kenya's constitution. LSK President Nelson Havi joins us. Karibu sana, Mr. President.
Sante, Mr. Smart.
BBI lead lawyer Paul Mwangi is also with us tonight.
Thank you.
And obviously, advocate and a love of the show, Linda Musumba, joins us as well. Lady, gentlemen, perhaps we should start where we should, and perhaps with Paul. We do know that, at least announcement, that you're going to appeal to the Supreme Court on this BBI decision. Is that still going on? And what do you hope to achieve with that?
Yes, that is still going on, and an appeal to the Supreme Court is very well advised on 2 reasons. One, there's no need of having a Supreme Court if it cannot weigh in on a matter like this. This is possibly one of the most serious questions that have ever been asked about this Constitution. And the reason why we put up a Supreme Court is because we said we needed a court that would be authoritative on these matters. So it would actually be quite irresponsible to leave such serious matters at the decisions of lower courts. It's important to have every issue that was in dispute resolved by a Supreme Court, because that becomes authoritative, and that becomes the basis on which people can move forward and make their decisions. But secondly, even before we go to the Supreme Court, there are 2 pending advisory references. There was a reference that was filed by the county government of Kericho and Nandi. That was number 3 of 2020, and there was number 4 filed by Makueni. And those were stayed on the basis that these matters had already arisen in lower courts. So it is also important that the court now also be asked to start listening to the references that were before it in the light of the decisions that have been made in the lower courts.
Right. Like I'm to Mr. President Nelson, you have challenged these matters from the High Court to the Court of Appeal. How do you first see this appeal to the Supreme Court? Is it necessary from where you sit? Or, as Paul says, it's necessary that some matters are settled with finality? Or you just think this is just another, pulling of, the tail?
No, I wouldn't belittle it as a matter of pulling the tail, because BBI bill was a serious enterprise to those who stood out to promote it. It is therefore only prudent that they test the limits of the law at the apex court, which is the Supreme Court. At this point in time, it will not be proper for us to belittle any such intended appeal. It's only us, and when we meet the appeal itself, interrogate it and evaluate to what extent is it viable. But for now, I think it is within their right to pursue an appeal.
Mm-hmm. Yes. Linda, from where you sit, it's been more than, I think, 6 months now, Kenyans have had to deal with, the BBI question, as it started getting through, and then the appeals. People are starting to deal with this. From where you sit, is it you sit on the same panel, say, well, perhaps Paul and team should let these matters rest?
Actually, James, I do join both Paul and the President in saying that I think it's important for some of these issues, some of the questions at a practical level, to be tested at the Supreme Court. And I have in mind the question of, for example, the IEBC's, the legality of the decisions that they've made, the by-elections they've held, and their role. We're heading to 2022, where we're going to have a general election, and we certainly want to have that general election on a sound footing. So for that reason, if that is still a question hanging on our, in our minds and on our heads, I think that it's better that it's resolved. Mm-hmm. Yes.
Paul, would you say, from the Court of Appeal, obviously you're decided, that's why you're appealing this decision, but what are the 3 things that for you stand out and say these are the things that we cannot let these matters rest, from where you sit?
To me, it is basically one. The issues of IBC are serious, but a lot of them are going to be resolved immediately the new commissioners come in. The question of how IEBC will operate from their henceforth will become resolved. Yes, there is a pending issue of the by-elections that have been done and what happens, but we're also going into another election. So even in terms of the damage that the lack of resolution of that issue can cause, I think it's very diminished. What needs to be determined is how we shall deal with this constitution from here henceforth.
Right.
Because the issue of amendment will live with this constitution. And there is still a desire, which has been there from promulgation, that some things should be relooked at. We cannot assume that simply because this has failed, this is the last time anybody is going to want to do this. I think these matters will live with us. The desire to amend this constitution is not going to die. The question will be, how do we move from here? And what are the roadmaps that the court has to set on how either the same group of people in the future or even other generations are going to deal with the constitution from here.
Would I be right? What I'm hearing you say is before the BBI was so much about being done before the election because there were things that were needed for the election. Am I correctly saying that now it's academic exercise and probably like setting some legal things straight so that next time if someone else wants to amend the constitution, it's finally settled?
I think whether it is things can be done before the next election or not depends on the Supreme Court and how fastly they themselves can resolve it, because they can resolve it too late for any venture to be entered into. So and I'm saying it goes beyond the relevance of what the next election will be into the fact that the issue of amendment lives with the Constitution and therefore must be resolved.
Mm-hmm. Mr. President, would you say the same before? And I think one of the reasons the BBI, and we've had so many discussions around it, that there was the political question of the BBI and the timing of it, over and above the legal questions that are being raised. Would you say that the fact that, if we hear Paul correctly, that we say, well, whether it happens before the election or not, it's no longer the sting with the BBI now. It's about setting with finality, some legal questions.
Absolutely, because to a large extent, the BBI bill was a power-sharing agreement that intended to accommodate as many as possible of the key political players in Kenya. Much as it may have been disguised as a constitutional amendment, it was a memorandum of understanding. And these arrangements are time-bound. I do not think right now that arrangement is as appealing to the players as it was a year before. To that extent, therefore, what remains to be determined at the Supreme Court will be the legal questions. Irrespective of what outcome may arise from the Supreme Court, it is least likely that should they succeed in the Supreme Court, that enterprise will benefit them for the election that will be scheduled for 9th of August 2022.
And that was a problem really with the people who are against the BBI. The question was the matters. I mean, I think almost 76 articles, if I'm not wrong, or 73, 74.
Yes.
Sections, yes, or issues, right?
Issues were less.
And the question of that was that then this is sort of like a meal prepared for the two brothers, if you like,
yes.
And that was problematic, wasn't it?
Yes, it was problematic because, and this is what both the High Court and the Court of Appeal underscored. The Constitution is intended to be a charter, though not eternal, but lasting for a considerable period of time. And the law ought to protect the Constitution and barricade it so that it's not used as a power-sharing tool. And to that extent, you see the reasons as to why the court demarcated the parameters upon which the politicians, though entitled to advocate for change, cannot transcend beyond and say, for this particular case, we want an executive that will have a president, will have a prime minister, will have two deputy prime ministers, will have cabinet ministers who are domiciled in the National Assembly. And you see, it tends to deviate considerably from what has been there before. And there is no better way to explain it than a power-sharing agreement that cannot fit into a framework that the people are prepared to go with to the next generation.
Mr. President, if I could push you back on this question. There is the question of politics every time we go to elections, yes. And it's always a divisive question, right? And we saw that in 2017, rearing its ugly head. The question of how politicians and how our elections become this matter of conflict every time is a political question, isn't it?
Yes, it is a political question. In fact, in one article by the retired Chief Justice David Kanani Maraga said it's a matter of life and death, because whoever controls the executive in terms of the presidency has a repository of resources, both human and financial, with which to reward the people who have tagged along him or her in that contest. But must it always be like that? Because initially, when they propelled the building bridges narrative, the idea was inclusivity, to bring harmony and tranquility. A question is asked, can't you achieve the same tranquility, peace and harmony, and equitable distribution of resources within the framework that we have? My answer will be yes. And if you perceive it from that perspective, then it becomes manifest. The intention behind this push may not have been people-driven, may not have been people-oriented, and may not have intended to benefit the people, right, but the political class.
Paul, it's, again, the same question. The question of, again, what happens during elections is a political question, right? It's domiciled in the politics of the day. How does that then, how do you marry this sort of like the legal parameters that says, well, we have a constitution that says we should do these things, but the politics of the day doesn't fit that?
The problem I have with what President is saying and how the court approached this is because there was an arrogance about the way the court is doing it, and not realizing that it is actually usurping the sovereignty of the people, because it's been patronizing. It's telling people, I don't think this is good for you, and I think you could have done this in another way. In fact, in one of the judgments, the court was saying, no, this sounds like a statute. I don't think it's in the business of the court to tell the people what they are going to have. The idea is that you must just let them decide. It might be bad, you might not like it. Even the document we have today, very many people don't like it. It's badly written in many places. It doesn't even have a structural logic in very many places. It's still accepted. And there are people who have a problem with the way it was drafted. So it's not a question of sitting down and deciding that I don't like the way you're doing it, or I don't like the way you have pursued this. The purpose of taking it back to the people is that you must let the people themselves come and say, we don't like this, or come and say, we are not going to amend our constitution because we think there is a better way to do this. But in fact, I think every other new constitution eventually ends up where the Kenyan constitution ended up. The South African constitution has gone through the same thing. Right. It's not new. If the reasoning that we are getting today from the Kenyan High Court and Court of Appeal were to be applied to the US, they would not have a Bill of Rights, because the initial constitution did not have a Bill of Rights. It's somebody who woke up and said, we made a mistake. And therefore, they went back and had to amend it. Nobody went and started saying there's a basic structure. The basic structure would be that they had no Bill of Rights, and that's the way they would be living today.
Linda, what calls being arrogant?
That's Paul's opinion about the arrogance aspect is Paul's opinion. But what I'd like to say about the same question that you've asked my brothers is that it was not long after we passed the 2010 Constitution that we ran into headwinds. I.e. that the question of Chapter 6, integrity, yes, came calling. And there was divided opinion about it, about how to implement it. Do we actually have pathways to be able to implement it or not? We encountered that right after the promulgation of the Constitution. And then another thing that also came up was the discrepancy between Article 27 that talks about equality and not more than 2/3 in appointive as well as elective positions. Yeah. And then you have Article 97 that provides for a parliament that, of course, has got the 47 women reps, but does not provide a mechanism like Article 177 does for the county assemblies to ensure that not more than 2/3. So we don't have the not more than 2/3 criteria being kept within the National Assembly. So what am I saying? I'm saying even before the BBI, we had noticed things about the Constitution that needed to be amended, yeah? Right. So the question of amendment and how to amend the Constitution is very important to resolve, because regardless of whether the BBI is there or not, and even before then, we needed to know how to be able to remedy the Constitution and the issues that we find, not, working well with each other. So for that reason, settling that question at the Supreme Court is important, so that tomorrow anybody who wants to be able to pursue amendment, whether it, as Paul said, is the same group or other different people, we can be able to find a pathway to make it work. Because as we know right now, there are certain aspects about the Constitution that don't work in tandem.
Right. So what I'm hearing tonight that, going to the Supreme Court is more of an academic exercise.
Not really. No. It's not an academic exercise, Mr. Smart. Yeah. I think it's important that we underscore that fact. The Supreme Court is the last court of record. And if there is a legal question that ought to be tested, it must be tested to that limit. But perhaps let me weigh in a little bit on what my friend Paul Mwangi said. It's not a manifestation of arrogance on the part of the High Court and the Court of Appeal, because it cannot be said in a civilized society that people must always be allowed to do that which they want. I mean, you may want to do many things, but are they within the limits that ensure you do not infringe on her rights, you don't infringe on my rights? And insofar as constitutional making is concerned, insofar as the amendment of the Constitution can be an issue, there are set parameters, there are set laws that must be adhered to. And the moment politicians come and tell us that this is a political question out of the reach of the courts, then therein lies the problem. And it must always be understood that in Kenya, the Constitution is the superior most law. It's law number one. It's not just a political document. Right. Yes.
Nelson Harvey, Linda Musumba, and Paul Mwangi, with all due respect, we'll take a short break. When we come back, we'll discuss the many problems this Constitution has and how do we start solving them away from the BBI.
You on Nyota. Pata channel sita zaidi when you pay for more than 1 month on Nyota Bouquet. Enjoy more entertainment on Nyota.
Did you know at Ruiru Mabati Factory, we offer free delivery within the same day? Did you know at Ruiru Mabati Factory, you can open an account and lipa pole pole at your convenience? Did you know at Ruiru Mabati Factory, you can get customized sizes according to your roof plan to avoid wastage? Call us now on 0111 050 700. Ruiru Mabati Factory, mali safi kwa bei poa.
Just one capful of Dettol is enough to disinfect surfaces and protect your family and your home. Dettol, tested effective against COVID-19.
Open your business account today and get immediate access to mobile banking, debit card services, and more. In addition, you can earn a good interest on your deposit. Let's do business together. We too are you.
Customer preferences are changing daily. You wake up one day, an innovation has come up and the customer wants a service in a way that you've not delivered before. Textbook Center aims to provide service, products and solutions that exceed our customers' expectations. Partnering with Sandy Transport ensures that we are able to deliver on our promise of being more than a bookshop.
Are you looking to settle your family in an affordable, clean and serene environment? Look no further than Garden of Joy in Machakos by Optiven. The project strategically sits between the Mua and Koma Hills, providing you with beautiful landscapes, fresh air and a much-needed break from the hustle and bustle of the city. The Garden of Joy also comes with a jogging track, a meditation park and a children's play area, making it the perfect location to set up your countryside home. Get your value-added plot at only 1.295 million shillings. We also have flexible payment options of up to 12 months. Call us today on 0790 300 300 or visit www.optivan.co.ke.
With all due respect, when we took a short break, my panel, on the point of agreeing of the many problems this constitution has. In 2010, just before passing this constitution, there was talk that 80% of it is good, 20% of it is bad. We didn't agree with of that 20%, but there was a number, that was bandied around. 80% good, 20% bad. But the question tonight is this: how do we start agreeing on the problems that we have collectively as a country and say, so then we say, well, we have 6, 7 issues that we need to fix. How do we start agreeing on that process? A BOMAS, perhaps? How do we start agreeing on this?
This is the problem I see with what the court is saying, because the court is telling people that they must go back to BOMAS. And that's the greatest peril you can ever put this constitution to. We all know that there are things that need to be put. We have the gender rule. It's not there. I don't even know how we are going to constitute the next parliament. And it must be addressed, and everybody knows it must be addressed.
As it is, the parliament is unconstitutional.
As it is, yes, and so I don't even know how we are going to constitute a new one, because the judiciary has already taken that position.
Yeah.
But once the court is saying you go and form a constituent assembly, but a constituent assembly means that everything is up for grabs. The moment people see it, and the court is itself acknowledging that this is the primary constituent power. So the day you constitute BOMAS again, the entire constitution will be up for grabs. Anything can be removed, anything can be replaced. So that's wisdom demands then that you must create avenues that allow us to address those specific issues.
Paul, your original argument was that the people should be able to change the constitution as and when they want, right?
Yes.
So if we create this situation, people want to change everything and whatever it is, there shouldn't be a problem with you.
What the current constitution did is that first there were the amendments that don't need to go for referendum. Then there are the amendments that need to go for referendum. And the thought was that there are amendments that are so serious that you don't want just to use the institutions that are there, you also want to involve the people. The problem, we've moved away from that and taken a further step, but a more perilous step. Because even if you retain the issue of referendum, you are only supposed to address very specific issues. But you can't go to the Constituent Assembly and say that we are only coming to address this issue. Once you put that Constituent Assembly, even the court has no jurisdiction over it. It can abolish that court itself. So in what they thought they were trying to cure the problem, they actually have put us in a very perilous condition, in which those people who did not like so many things in this constitution now have a platform to come and undo them.
Is that so, Linda?
I have a different view.
Of this Constituent Assembly?
Okay, first of all, I think Kenyans should be aware that the judges did not say the Constitution cannot be amended. They said it can be amended, but
cannot be dismembered.
It has to be done within a framework.
Right.
If you remember, the 2010 Constitution is a product of a framework. There was a legislative framework that was put in place to be able to bring this constitution, to come to pass. And part of that framework was there was a law, the Constitution of Kenya Review Amendment Act. And in it spelled, for example, the stakeholders who had to be involved in the review of the Constitution, the method that was going to be used. There was, first of all, going to be the public participation. Then there were levels, and there was to be the National Constitutional Conference, and so forth and so on. And then we saw that it collapsed at the BOMAS level, following Reverend Joya's case at the court, which said that, no, still this must be passed by people. So in other words, there was a framework within which we did that. The BBI, in its genesis, was actually, as it has been written, to advise the president on issues, to do with, how to come together, and then including any amendments required. So that's not a framework per se, because it was supposed to be an advisory to the president.
Right.
A framework would mean that you speak to many different people to find out, like, what are the contestations, what are the things, what is the best way to be able to go through this. Like Paul has said, there are some changes that do not need to go to a referendum. So I think it is people saying that the BBI is not a negotiated framework through which we can be able to change the constitution, and that's the problem that many people have with the BBI. That the BBI, being an advisory and mainly being dominated by two political parties, or two parties, or two parties, let me put it that way, there are people who feel left out. Whereas in the 1990, in the 2010 Constitution, bringing it up, people felt included.
Yeah.
So going forward, there needs to be a framework to be able to enable the Constitution to be changed, and whatever clauses, including those in BBI, could as well be brought within that framework.
Here's the conundrum, though, that the proposal of BBI then did, all the checks, got the million votes, got the counties, county assemblies to pass them, got parliament to ratify it. They got all the checks and balances, if you like. that are stipulated for you to change the constitution. What's wrong with that?
Yeah, but James, questions have been raised about the authenticity of these steps, yeah? So, for instance, the county assemblies being given an incentive to be able to vote and pass those, you know, that cannot be said that it is something that is...
But that's political. We cannot even account for that. It's a
yeah,
political question.
Well, but it was also it also received a mention in the judgment,
right,
didn't it?
Right.
It received a mention in the judgment.
Fair enough. Mr. President, when we're talking about this, and Paul is speaking about that if you talk about Constituent Assembly, you're inviting everyone to the table to discuss things that perhaps we don't even thought was a problem before. And that is a danger, that's a problem. So would you say the court has put us in this catch-22, that if we're ever going to change the constitution, then everything is on the table? Is that how you read it?
No, you see, the reason why Paul is fascinated with the Bomas idea and the Constituent Assembly is because he and his group do not want to heed the advice of the High Court and the Court of Appeal, and to a large extent, the popular view of the Kenyans. And which is this view? Stop digging. Just remain on the surface and see to what extent is what you see satisfactory. We said 80% of the Constitution was good on promulgation. 20 required some modification. Was BBI intended to deal with the 80 or with the 20? For instance, let's look at the presidency. The president is supposed to be a symbol of national unity. He must, or she must, be in a position to take into account the interests of the entire nation when allocating resources. Has that been done with the enabling framework in the Constitution? If that has not been done, then the problem is not on the executive to be remedied by expanding it through the creation of a prime minister and deputy prime minister. What about the cabinet? What was the intention on promulgation? We intended to have a cabinet that did not have political interference, one that will provide the necessary mechanism to enable the executive function optimally without interference from anybody else. Now, to what extent did we achieve that? I mean, as soon as the government that was elected after the promulgation of this constitution came into power, they brought in politicians into the cabinet. Now, other offices were created within the cabinet at a lower level, again, not in tandem with the constitution. Look at the judiciary. Do we have a problem with the judiciary, especially in the manner in which the Judicial Service Commission recommends the appointment of judges? We don't have a problem. Where is the problem? To a large extent, the problem emanates from the executive that wants to have control in the manner of appointment of judges. Is it part of the 80 or the 20? For as long as these issues remain part of the 80, there can be no compelling reason to look for solutions for now. And I belong to the school of thought that believes the problem we have right now with the Kenyan Constitution is not one of reform, is one of implementation. Look, for instance, the two-third gender principle. Why has it not been implemented up to now? If the executive and the political class, both in parliament and outside parliament, can marshal numbers to come and pass the BBI without any contestation, why can they marshal similar numbers to ensure that we have gender equity and parity? Therein lies the problem. We need to stop digging and remain on the surface.
Paul.
Maybe first I want to weigh in on,
please do,
on this issue. And firstly, this is why I'm saying I talked about arrogance, because there's a disrespect to the Constitution. As you said, we checked all the boxes with the Constitution as it is written. But then somebody is changing the goalposts as we come along, because there's something they're avoiding. They don't want us to score.
What's that?
Because all these things.
What's that?
What I mean, what is somebody from the blues,
yeah.
The issue of the Constituent Assembly came in. Now, as we bring it up, now it is now coming to different definitions. What do you know of Constituent Assembly? It's an assembly that the moment you put the Constitution there, it's up for grabs. But now, if we follow up that reasoning, the goalposts will keep changing. Everything will keep being shifted so that you can never achieve it. But then what are the rules? We are saying, why don't we follow? And why does the court also respect the Constitution as it is written? The people did not think these things. Don't think for them. If Harvey wants to make the amendment of the Constitution to what the courts are saying, go bring up a constitutional amendment and make it even harder. Don't use the courts to write our Constitution for us. They have no such jurisdiction.
Do you think that's what has happened?
That is what they are doing. Because now they have come up, Chapter 16 is now totally irrelevant. Because the courts have come up with a different way of amending our Constitution. They have no such right.
How the question, help me understand from a school of thought. So if we make it easy for anyone to, get the million signatures, perhaps, have a bit more money and bribe MCAs, MPs, if you can, then what stops a president, for instance, from being inaugurated at Kasarani and then going to State House the next day and say, the people wanted me to be king, scrap everything from, ministers to whatever. What stops that from happening?
First, that was a phantom. That was a boogeyman that was being used. And the Attorney General brought evidence that we have actually tried to amend this Constitution more than 20 times. Nobody has succeeded. So the Constitution is strong as it is. The Constitution is protecting itself as it is. The people themselves are protecting the Constitution as it is. So to create this fear that the Constitution will be, it would have happened. It's 10 years now, not once.
President, quick one before I go for the break.
No, I think the BBI proponents are looking for boogeymen in the court.
Everyone is looking for boogeymen.
They looked for one in the High Court, they didn't find. I think in the Court of Appeal, they almost found one. Now they're looking for a few more in the Supreme Court. No. It cannot be as simplistic as my learned friend wants to portray it. There has to be limits to the amendment power. And you posed a very apt question. In fact, from his team, a question was asked, what if the people decided one day they want to abolish Parliament? And it will surprise you that one of their team said, if the people want to abolish Parliament, then who are you as the courts to stop them from abolishing Parliament? You see, government grows. It is called the end of civil government. This is a civil government, one that is not susceptible to the caprice and the whim of an individual in the name of a monarch. But if you are to permit what Mwangi and his team conceive, then look at the BBI initiative, 74 amendments. What stops me, what stops him or her when they become president next year, enacting similar amendments? And it would require just 2 amendments to obliterate the entire Constitution. And this is the safeguard that has existed in constitutional making throughout. It's not anything new for us to lament that the court was arrogant, the court has decided for the people. I mean, is the court not part of the people? The framework of government, we the people, is tripartite. It's delegated to Parliament, executive, and the judiciary. And retired Chief Justice David Kanani Maraga, on his way out, he told the judges, always remember, we are not any less the people by mere virtue of the fact that we are not elected but appointed. We still represent the sovereign. So it cannot lie in anybody's mouth that the court does not have the power to barricade, to put parameters on what has to be done. And provided that those parameters have been based upon sound legal principles, tested. And look at the judgment of Justice Patrick Kiage, for instance. It traces it from antiquity. So it's not something that is nascent. It's not ideas that are being toyed with by the court. These are principles that have been set to prevent the Constitution from being used as a tool, as an agreement for negotiation towards an election to distribute power.
Right, you're watching With All Due Respect. I want to take a short break because we have plenty more to discuss. Over and above these boogeymen, we have to find them tonight. Where are they? With all due respect, take a short break. We'll be back.
Here's a toast kutoka Hunter's Choice. Cheers to those who dare follow their dreams. Kwa wale watu who chase their goals, whatever it takes. Ni lazima uweke effort, bro. Through the late nights and heated moments. Ikikam kwa the game of life, Chief, you just have to own it. Hunter's Choice. Own your game.
Win 100 million Kenya shillings for only 80 bob on the easiest jackpot in Kenya. The Super Jackpot. Play on betsafe.co.ke.
For a better tomorrow, don't forget to do the 1, 2, 3 with Colgate every night.
Here's a toast kutoka Hunter's Choice. Cheers to those who dare follow their dreams. Kwa wale watu who chase their goals, whatever it takes. Ni lazima uweke effort, bro. Through the late nights and heated moments. Ikikam kwa the game of life, Chief, you just have to own it. Hunter's Choice. Own your game.
Should deem, in comparison to bring into focus a major drought raving our countries, Wanjiku mustn't be force-fed politics every day ad infinitum. We're doubly here, lead the conversation waiting. God bless Kenya. Let's go back, Linda, and the question of implementation, that we've failed to implement this constitution as it is. For instance, what stops the president today from constituting a government that has the face of Kenya? What is that thing in the constitution that stops him from doing that?
Actually, James, there is nothing that stops him from doing so. But I just want to go back to a point that was made earlier about the judiciary, being, kind of being roguish and appearing arrogant
is the word that has been
and
used.
attempting to write law. So I just wanted to say that, of course, the three arms of government have got their roles, and the judiciary's role is to interpret the law. And what does the interpretation mean? Interpretation does not mean that the judiciary reads back to us the clauses of the Constitution or the clauses of the statutes. Interpretation means that they look at the law, they look at other factors that are brought to bear, for example, precedents. They look at, like they did in the BBI case, our history and so forth and so on, so that they can interpret. That is their role, interpretation, and that's not creation of new law. When they come up with their judgment, it is actually an interpretation of taking all these things into account. And now, back to your question on implementation. Nothing absolutely stops the president or any of the other office bearers, because we know also cabinet secretaries appoint boards. We know that at any level, right up to the boards of governors in schools, there are people who make appointments. So the law, as per Article 27, is very clear about the not more than 2/3. You can even make it 50-50. Not more than 2/3 is actually a minimum. But you can actually...
It's a bare minimum.
It's a bare minimum that we should not go below. In appointive as well as elective positions, nothing prevents it from being 50-50. For example, the cabinet can be 50-50. And we've seen, for example, countries like Rwanda, others within the region, closer to us, who've really fared well at striving towards the 50-50 position. So I just want to emphasize that the not more than 2/3 is just a bare minimum, and we can do so much better just by, that political will, that interest in ensuring that the right thing gets done. So there are very many clauses that, that just require us just to implement them as they are. And we shall find that we're actually in obedience to the Constitution.
The problem of political will, Paul, and the question, just before the break, if the people want to, do away with Parliament, for instance, why shouldn't they?
The problem, we have started, unfortunately, misleading people in Kenya about what other constitutions of the world say. And people in Kenya have been made to believe that there's some international agreed standards and mandates about how constitutions look like. So, for instance, one of the biggest fights that there has been is whether the president has a role in the appointment of judges. And we are made to believe that internationally that's the worst thing that can happen. But that's what happens in most of the constitutions, even in America. It's the president who chooses the judges. So we're actually very far ahead, even within the structure that we have, and even within that which is being complained of. We have, in the UK, in South Africa, they don't have elections. In South Africa, they don't necessarily vote for a single candidate. That's still democracy. In the House of Lords in England, nobody's voted in, they inherit their seats. That is still democracy. So let's not talk about constitutionalism as if there is some template, internationally agreed template, It's people to decide for themselves how they want to make their decisions. If people come with a way to make law, and the way they make law is representative and has nothing to do with the parliament, it is within their rights to do so. And we can't have our judiciary now coming to sell to us a position as if there are some internationally agreed templates of doing these things. That is undermining the sovereignty. That's why we protected the sovereignty of the people, by saying that it is for them to decide. And that is why I still keep using the word arrogant, that the moment you start telling the people that in their sovereignty there are things they cannot do, then that becomes arrogant.
Linda, we got a bit of historical journey here, and allowing people, of course, through their leaders, to do whatever they want to do. We go back to the problems we had, or questions we had, in the 80s and 90s, when, Section 2A, scrap, make the country, a one-party state, because the people want it, right? Change things, along the way, give the president more powers to appoint whoever needs to appoint, because the people essentially want it. What's the danger with that?
Obviously, it is very important to stay within what could be called a bandwidth. So, for example, we cannot agree as a country that we are going to now accept murder as, murder is going to be an acceptable thing in our society. We would be completely out of the bandwidth that, that the whole world is operating within.
What if the people want? Paul says if the people want.
No, of course, within the limits of what they call now basic human rights. Okay. And that is why they have a chapter by themselves.
So there are standards.
Those are not negotiable.
All right.
So, so Paul agrees that there is some modicum of bandwidth that we have to operate within.
Right.
Yeah, so you see, the danger again of going outside of that bandwidth is to the extreme spectrum, which would then not enable us to function as a society, because at the end of the day, the Constitution is there to facilitate us to do the things we want to do. To facilitate government to be able to administer the country in the best way possible. So if we also then put things within the Constitution that prevent us to be able to function as a society, because government is supposed to enable us as citizens to be able to, to be the best we that we can be. That's the function of government, to enable citizens to be the best, persons that they can be, exploit their skills, potentials, etc. So if we slip to either extreme end of the spectrum, it will not be possible to achieve that. Mm-hmm. So that's why I say that we have to work within a bandwidth.
Mr. President, what's the problem with the people deciding what they want, and who essentially then has the powers to tell the people you can't do this?
We, the people, must always be respected. I do not have a problem with that. But it's different to mobilize using state resources through coercion, caprice, bribery, accumulate a critical mass and say that this is we the people. That was not the intention of democracy. For instance, do we as Kenyans honestly believe that Uhuru Kenyatta and Raila Odinga constituted we the people in the divisive manner in which they initiated and propelled the BBI agenda? The popular view is that they did not. And to a large extent, the popular view is right. They mobilized using state resources, threats, coercion, bribery. This can never be the essence of democracy. We, the people, must be free will. And the moment you mobilize in this manner, then you cease being we, the people. And it must be understood who went to the court. The court did not just make a decision from nowhere. We are in an adversarial system. People went to the court. They said, we, the people, do not agree with the BBI bill. And we think the government, in conjunction with certain individuals outside government, have mobilized and taken over what is otherwise our power as the sovereign. And the court agreed. And just to close this argument that has been repeated every sentence and paragraph by my very good friend, that the courts cannot impose their will. Let me go back to what Kiage says. Give us good research, we'll give you a good judgment. Nothing that emanates from the decision of the Court of Appeal is a product of the court. It is a product of we the people who went and said, those two individuals who have taken our right as the people are taking us on a perilous course. And the court said, having looked at your case comparatively, historically, and legally, we are convinced that what you seek of us is due to you. And they said, you the people, take, this is your right.
First, I don't know why Mr. President gets the idea that that's what the majority of the people wanted. In fact, to me, the only reason all these hurdles are being put is because nobody wants it to get to the people, because the majority will vote it in. And that would happen. That's why all these things are being done. But the decision of when you actually now say we the people is when you get to the referendum. You can't be, then you'd have to have a referendum even about the questions to address. It's not possible. So somebody must propose, even if it's one person. And the seriousness of the question is shown on if you can get 1 million people to come and support you. And the very unfortunate thing with even the way the courts dealt, because the court closed their eyes to the fact that in every page that people were signing, there was a statement and a declaration written there saying that I have read the bill and I understand. That was totally ignored and pretended like it was never there. But that's another thing. But let me take this to another level, which is that to me, judgments have become about academic contestations, not about wisdom. So we are not looking at what is good for Kenya, and we're saying, no, you came up, you read so many books, you brought so many books, and this theory of yours seems to sound well. And it really is not mattering whether all those theories actually relate to us, or even whether they are good for us. So nobody is trying to be wise anymore. Everybody is just trying to look clever. And we are increasingly getting to a point where judgments of the court are sounding more like pontifications rather than resolutions of real dispute, because everybody should get out of that court, even if you don't agree with it, feeling accommodated. Not feeling as if the judgments have become about who's right, who's wrong, who's good, who's evil, who's liberal, who's conservative.
But that's why we have the judges.
Because we are all, everybody is in Kenya. That constitution belongs to everyone. Even those who want to amend it, they are trying to amend it because it's their constitution. And you must be able to come up with a solution that fits everybody and that satisfies everybody.
Let's take this to the next level. Who essentially, I think what we've gotten to the point is who has the power to summon the people? And what should they do so that it is an appearance that this person is not going to benefit directly from this thing? And I suppose that person obviously has to be an executive. Who has the power to summon the people in that?
I believe, when something is right, it is just manifestly right. So, for example, if you want to see a process where both parties or all parties are, essentially accepting of that process. For me, it starts with it begins with the framework. It begins with you putting a framework that is going to, first of all, enable the widest number of people to be able to participate. So, for example, a framework that takes into account that there are people who come from this region of Kenya, that region of Kenya, people from different socioeconomic status, people from different worldviews, people from, differences. A framework that accommodates all that so that all those people can be able to say what they want to say or give their views. In the end, not every view is going to be, reach the decision, is not going to make the decision. But the widest number of views, one ought to be able to get a sense, because you can already see the way the direction that is being taken when you're in a process of public participation. Huh? So through that process, you'll find that there are some certain things that will emerge from eastern, western, northern, southern, in the center that appear to be acceptable to the majority. And through a process like that one, then it would provide the basis for us to be able to move forward.
So there's a question around that then this appears to be a very costly exercise. Wanjiku is not going to be able to accommodate everyone and find a way. So exactly who's going to have the power to do this?
Of course, articles, the articles in the Constitution that, provide pathways for the change of the Constitution. There's the popular way. There is, of course, the parliamentary way. And then, so all these, of course, are still going. They cost money. But, James, so do other things cost money. It costs money for us to put parliamentarians there, to the numbers that there are. It costs money. This democracy costs money. So when it comes to seeking views about something so important about us changing the Constitution, let's not bring in the cost issue, because everything we do costs money, including corruption.
And that's why I say that, the powers of the people to amend their constitution is being taken away slyly. Because at one hand, you say the executive can never use popular initiative, state organs cannot use popular initiative, state officers cannot use popular initiative, it's for Wanjiku. Then you go right ahead and prescribe for Wanjiku things that cost billions to do, and then pretend that you have upheld the right of the people to amend their constitution. Of course you've not, you just killed it. And you know you're doing that. But they're just being sly about it.
Mr. President.
Smart.
Yes. Help us here. We're getting into a conundrum.
In food production, there are certain scientific technologies that are being adopted, like genetically modified production.
Yes.
They will find comfort in the plant kingdom. But there are certain things you cannot abridge. For instance, the gestation period. You can't. You must wait for 21 days to hatch a chick. You must wait for 9 months to birth a calf. It's as simple as that.
Yeah.
But these gentlemen want to give us genetically modified constitutional moments, which cannot sustain. And to go back to your question, when do we really see that it is Wanjiku initiating the process? Has it been done before? In 1991, we got rid of Section 2A to bring back multi-party democracy. Who did it? Of course, Moi went to Kasarani and said, nimekubali kutoa ile kipengele ya 2A. But it's not Moi who initiated it. It is the people. The clamor for change was visible in Kenya. You understand? Let's go to 1995, 1996. It was felt that the electoral body then was not properly constituted. Where did the complaint come from? Did it come from the government? No. And then as we move towards 2008, when hell broke loose, it is still the people, through masses, that said, before we go to the peril that we have just experienced in the general election, we need to have a proper legal framework in our constitution, where if I am dissatisfied with the outcome of the election, I'll go to the court. You understand? And it must also come out quite clear that whoever is in office upon an election is supposed to govern, rule, or serve with the law that brought him or her to office. You don't change the rules of the game midway. And this will be so. So it should not bother our minds that what did we miss? How best can we still come up with this idea? These are genetically modified concepts. They're just not permissible.
Right. Smart, allow me one thing.
To respond.
To respond, because the other thing that came out also in the court, the High Court and both the Court of Appeal, is a deliberate writing of history to fit particular goals. And now, Mr. President is saying that in 1991, it is the people who, there was some public participation. You know, you were there in 1991. It was just
there wasn't.
It was just a gift that was thrown there. But Moi was the say, oh, he gave it to us, or he refused to give it to us. The parliament, what I'm saying is that to try to make the 1991 moment as a proud moment, that the Kasarani meeting, as a meeting of Kenyans, but then we come to one thing.
Wasn't there public
the
pressure?
The clamor had been there 5 years before.
Wasn't there public
Moi
pressure?
gave it to us because he had pressure and he was he wanted to do his own survival. But let's not make it as if that the Kasarani meeting was some kind of a constituent assembly. It was a Kanu meeting. In fact, that Kanu meeting resolved not to remove it. It is Moi who said, I will remove it. But the meeting said, don't remove it. But that's not the point. Come to another thing that came out on the issue of bombers. One of the judgments that the Court of Appeal said that the presidential system is part of our basic structure. But the evidence that was before the court was that the presidential system was imposed on us by MPs at Naivasha. And that all along, until we went to Naivasha, the actual system of government that everybody had agreed on, that had been voted on at Bomas, that had survived all along, is the system of government that was being proposed by BBI. But history was now being rewritten so as to discredit and legitimize what BBI was saying.
So, be as it may, Paul, I think we have to be very clear, again, with all due respect, that why didn't Moi then do it in 1990 or 1993?
I am not saying that he did not do it under pressure, but to start to represent Kasarani as this big constituent assembly where a very important decision was made by Kenyans, that's rewriting history.
Right.
I didn't hear the president say that the meeting in Kasarani was a constituent assembly. I think he was just saying that was the venue where this happened. Yeah. So I think that going forward, it's really very important that some of these issues, as has been said by my brothers, are actually articulated in court for the final time at the Supreme Court to enable us move forward. Because as we've said earlier on, there are issues that we need to be solved and to be resolved in this constitution, and it's urgent.
Right.
For example, the not more than 2/3 continues to hang, to hang in all spaces. Yeah, we need it sorted and once and for all. So if a pathway can be made clear for how amendments can take place, that is something that I welcome, and I'm sure many Kenyans would welcome. Including, I'd like to say, James, there are certain things within the BBI, in fact, many things that Kenyans appreciate. I mean, who doesn't appreciate, for example, any rebate given to students in health? Who wouldn't appreciate that? Which parent wouldn't want that? Who wouldn't want many things that have been put within the BBI? What we are saying is give us a method that the people, give us a method through which people can comfortably come to be able to make that decision.
Right.
So I think for me, the point to underscore is that the process of BBI is what is contested. We didn't even get to the substance. The substance was not, was not part of what was issued in the courts. It is the process. So people haven't had an opportunity to sit down and for example, discuss and be able to, basically, it hasn't been put to Kenyans to be able to look at the substance so that they can be able to make a decision. So I would urge that the issues within BBI that are positive or any other issues that were left out by BBI, can we be given a path or can we create a path through which people can be able to make a decision?
Okay, I want to start running down, and the question still hangs. We're going to an election in less than 10 months or so. We still have not resolved the question of, IEBC is going to be sorted, yes, but there's still the public confidence and the problem with, the process of elections, if you like. There's the question of the winner takes all, hasn't been solved. And we know for sure, if you live in this country, or part of this country, east of this country, that these are political problems. And some of the things that the BBI are going to solve them. True or not true? So, as we make our final remarks, looking into the elections, 10 months to the elections, what are the things that you'd say from where you sit, must do, things that we have to look out for, and say, well, this is a problem, but it has to find a political solution away from, sort of a legal solution, because we can have one.
There are many take-homes that Kenyans must pick from the judgment of the High Court and the one of the Court of Appeal on the BBI issue. It's not just about BBI. It is all about transparency and accountability so far as leadership in Kenya is concerned. The executive and the president, without mincing words, was chided for waiting for an entire 2-3 years to make the appointments to fill the vacancies that had arisen out of the IEBC. This space, in law we call it interregnum or lacuna, this space, this void should never be there, so that the IEBC must perform optimally. Of course, a tractor can run with 3 wheels, but what is the optimum capacity of a tractor on account of wheels? It's 4 wheels. And it's only through ensuring that we have confidence in the IEBC. And this is confidence that is already created by the law itself. It is the individuals within and outside that commission that we need to look at. And for me, our concern right now, as we go to the election next year, is to empower the IEBC to deliver free and fair elections, a credible election. And the moment we have that, the winner-take-it-all conundrum fails to exist. Because we have said this, and we must emphasize this. The president is the symbol of national unity. When appointments are being made by the president or anybody in the executive, they have to take into account gender, ethnic, and regional balance. What problem is there that has not been solved by the Constitution to ensure that I do not mind who I elect as president, because I'm satisfied that what is due to me in Nangili, what is due to me in Gatundu or Nyaribari Church will percolate to me because of the fact that I'm a Kenyan, not because of the fact that I'm a Kalenjin, a Luo, or a Kikuyu. Therein lies the problem. This issue of winner take it all has been created by those who are already in power. It doesn't exist in the Constitution. And perhaps whosoever will ascend to the echelon of leadership of this country must be reminded that we'll hold him or her accountable to the same standards that we have held Kibaki and Uhuru Kenyatta for the last 11 years of this Constitution. You cannot tell us because you come from a majority community, you will concentrate cabinet appointments amongst Luos, amongst Kalenjin, or Kikuyus, or Luyas. That is wrong. And it cannot be your answer that I ascended to leadership because of this majority. No. The Constitution says the moment you become president, you cease being ODM, you cease being NC, you cease being UDA.
Present for all people.
You are present for all people. In fact, you should not be affiliated with any political party. Just shed off the party and be a symbol of national unity. Therein lies the solution, not this genetically modified amendments.
Linda, how do we solve the political problems in a minute or less as we go to an election?
For me, what I celebrate the most is the way the courts have really been vanguards in upholding, upholding the rule of law, so that this contest we're having about BBI, we didn't have it, in the bushes, or we didn't resort to having to use, uncivilized means to be able to resolve it. It was taken to the courts. So both parties, whether they're, both sides of the divide, were able to articulate their issues at the High Court, and then go on to the Court of Appeal, and with the possibility of also, I think, it has been stated that there's going to be, a further engagement at the Supreme Court. That says something, that we are resolving our issues, in a way that is actually structured, as opposed to, elsewhere. So going towards the 2022 general elections, for me it is that we are going to the 2022 general elections with a reinforcement in the minds of people that we can resolve issues through the courts, and that the courts can actually, render judgments that majority of people, or people in either, many people will feel that they're good. Right. So I think it is for people to be able to, the take home to 2022 is that any disputes our courts are capable of resolving them.
Paul, we have to subject you to the courts, but to make your final remarks.
Okay, for me, as a person who thinks about what's going on in society, what I see going on in society is first an attempt by the courts on one hand, because they have done that a lot, and civil society on another hand, because they have also done that a lot, to delegitimize the political class, to delegitimize politics, and to believe that everything and every problem in this country is going to be sorted out with some legal theory and some court decision. That's not how this society is. When we talk about winner take all, people are communities. And that is a fact, and you're not going to take that away with a judgment. And they will feel, if they don't, that's why we talk about the face of Kenya, because that was realistic about the fact that people are regions and are also communities. So let's stop talking first about legal theories and legal decisions as being the panacea for all our ills. We will have to have healthy politics and healthy political solutions to our problems. But secondly, the other problem is that, to me, the other thing that is continuously lacking and that came up with from BBI, but has been going on for a long time, is that we are beginning to lack a lot of wise resolutions, even in courts. And that's why I said that a lot of court decisions are no longer resolutions of disputes, they are just pontifications of positions. And we need courts to take it and say, you have this society must go ahead, and must go ahead with everyone, and must go ahead in a way that is helpful to other people. Right. But to take our constitution, throw it back to bombers, very blind of what you've just done, because you want to uphold some legal theory, and now put actually that constitution in the worst peril it has ever been at, I don't think that's very wise.
All right. Thank you very much to my panel tonight. Paul Mwangi, Linda Msuba, and President Nelson Harvey. Appreciate all of you coming as part of my surrender on a tweet that had earlier mentioned that lawyers are the worst of political analysts. Tonight has proved me wrong. So I take back my words and I take back the tweet. You're watching with all due respect. Thank you all very much for coming through.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Smart.
Appreciate it.
Good.
Thank you.
Whoa.
Thank you.
Thank you. President.